Kirsten Gibson. I'm based in the music department at Newcastle University, and I'm also acting Associate Dean for Engagement and Place in the HAS faculty, Humanities and Social Sciences faculty. I'd like to welcome and thank Leila very much for suggesting and curating today's Wor Culture event on access. And I'd also like to thank Papi and Chris for speaking today, as well as the bloggers who are going to be contributing to continuing this discussion after today's event. A couple of housekeeping tips. I think Bob said these already in the chat, but just in case you've not picked them up, please could you turn off your video and mute your microphone for the presentations, because this will support obviously easier visibility for the presentations. If you are comfortable doing so, we'd obviously encourage you to turn the video on for the breakout discussions and feedback later in today's session. During the presentations that are coming up, please use the chat function to share comments, links and ask questions, and we will have a little bit of a Q&A after the presentations before we go into the breakout rooms. And finally, just please note that the event will be recorded, but it's only the presentations that will be sent out following the event. So I'm going to stop there and I'm going to hand over to Leila to introduce today's session.
First of all, I wanted to say thank you to Newcastle University for hosting this event. It's the Wor Culture platform is a platform that I really value, and it gives me the opportunity to bring together people that I really want to hear the views of, and it's really helped me to be able to platform some conversations over the past couple of years. So if any of you have got anything that you would really like to sort of platform across the sector, then I would definitely say for you to get in touch with Bob, I guess, in the first instance, and let him know that you've got some ideas for events in the future. It's a really great platform. It's a great platform because the university are wonderful at hosting, and it's also a great platform because it brings lots of people together from across the sector, so freelancers and organisations. It also brings academics together as well, and local authority and funders too. So I would definitely say, if you've got anything that you would like to talk about, that it's worth getting in touch with Bob. When I first envisaged this event, I wanted the views of lots of different people represented before the event, and this hasn't been 100% possible due to lots of unavoidable reasons. But as Kirsten said, that sounds a bit like an excuse, but there'll be several blogs which will come after the event from individuals and organisations with some different perspectives. This event will still be brilliant, but I just wanted to explain that, just to contextualise it a little bit. Firstly, we should all be thinking about access and what it means within our work. We've got real problems in our sector overall, where holding down a sustainable career is completely unachievable for so many people, and where many people feel unsafe and unsupported in our institutions. This isn't about bashing organisations, as there's also many organisations doing such amazing things, and people can be doing amazing things, and the same organisation can feel both inclusive and exclusive to lots of people. And access means different things to different people. So as a sector, we're generally run by structures that are very Eurocentric, capitalist, neurotypical and disabling. I'd probably go so far as to say structures that do hold up systemic structures of oppression. Organisations and spaces can feel exclusive to many people, and it's hard to connect with many areas of mainstream culture, whether that's as a consumer or as a producer. Access can feel like an add-on, and career progression can feel like it's only ever for the emerging. So like, what happens to us once we've emerged? How can people develop and sustain careers across arts and culture when they don't feel welcomed into funded spaces? How can we ask ourselves the difficult questions about the spaces that we create as well? Because we've all got a responsibility within this. So before we go into the brilliant presentations from Papi and Chris, I want to pose a few questions for you to think about in the context of the socioeconomic, race, gender, identity, disability, caring responsibilities, neurodiversity, rurality, intersectionality, and any other ways that people are excluded from our sector. Why is access important, and why is representation essential? What do we need to do? How can we all do better? After this event, I would like us to think about what we can do in our own work. And through Northeast Cultural Freelancers, we'd like to start shining a light on the great practice. Where are the spaces that people are feeling welcomed into? Where is the work really engaging audiences that are maybe lesser represented elsewhere? Where is co-creation happening in a really meaningful and authentic way? We're especially interested in work which isn't core-funded, where organisations are using their own resourcefulness to create change. And also where there's spaces where resources can be shared with each other, so we can create a little bit of maybe, for want of a better description, a toolkit that people can access and see where great work's happening and how maybe they could replicate that within their own work. So firstly, we'll be hearing from Papi, and then we'll be hearing from Chris. So I am going to hand over to Papi now.
Hello, how you doing? Thank you very much, Leila. Right, so hi, I'm Papi. So basically when Leila asked me to do this presentation, I was trying to work out what it is I wanted to say, what information I wanted to give. And basically I ended up just doing a full, pretty much explanation of my life, where I came from and where I am now, and just some of the stuff that happened along the way. So I'll start off by saying I'm Papi Jeovani. I'm a poet, writer, actor, theatre maker / producer. Yes, so many titles. And yeah, so Newcastle is a funny place for me, simply because there's so much good and yet so much bad things about it. One of the good things about Newcastle is that there's a lot of room for growth. However, one of the bad things about Newcastle is that there's a lot of room for growth. And why I think that's both good and bad is because, well, yeah, the good thing is obviously, yeah, you'll always, for people, certain people, there's always somewhere you can go. There's always space that needs your voice to fill it, which obviously it's great. It's our passion. But on the flip side, typically what that means is that you tend to be the only person there, or the first person doing what it is that you want to do. And that's very, very tough, because then there's no one really you can look up to, no one really who can help you guide you on the specificness of what it is you want to do. So you end up having to create, you kind of have to be your own mentor in a way, which is, fine to a point, but considering that there's so many, obviously, different organizations, so many different places, you'd expect some place would be able to accommodate that, but it doesn't tend to be the case. So that's something that I had to work out a long time ago, and I worked out that I obviously had to find different people in different places to, yeah, mentor me along the way, in a way. But yeah, that's that. So I'm originally from Luanda, Angola, born 1987. Portuguese was my first language. It's not anymore. I've got a complicated relationship with that. I was born in the west end of Newcastle, and yeah, obviously, if you know that area, it's very, very rough for a lot of people. I didn't get into acting, so acting is my primary focus. I didn't really get into acting until I saw my older siblings play Romeo and Juliet back in year 6. That's when I first okay, this is actually really good. I want to get involved with that. And then, yeah, I moved into high school, went to Excelsior, and then I started just doing some drama classes. Excelsior has musicals going on, so by the time I got to year 9, I was like, right, and I want to see what's about, see if I'm good, see if I like it. So all the way up to this point, I still hadn't really known anything about the theatre world. I didn't know where any of them were or where any of them existed. The first theatre that I heard of was live theatre, and that was because one of my peers at Excelsior, they were also a member of the youth theatre, so it was a word of mouth type thing. I think, yeah, growing up in the West End, I never heard of any plays that are going on, any opportunities. I'm not sure about the marketing that was going on back then. Obviously, this is back in between 1990 and 2010. So yeah, I didn't really get into, even though I knew I liked acting, I wanted to go out into acting. Even by 2010, I didn't really get into it until 2015, simply because there's no place that felt welcoming to me. Yeah, and even then, it wasn't until university back in 2016, that's when I first got introduced properly to the theatre world. And that was because of my course. So I went to university and I did a drama degree. And for my drama degree, I had to go to and watch shows. I was like, oh, so I was introduced to Northern Stage. I was introduced to Alphabetti. And then later on again, I was introduced to Theatre Royal and other places. But again, even still then, I talked to some of my friends who are also actors, and I talked to some of the people who, some of my peers who are now working in the industry, and I was just telling them about how even when I walk past it, or even when I do see what's going on, it still doesn't, there's still this kind of like barrier in between us. It's very difficult to explain. It's like the Theatre Royal, for example, beautiful place, a lot of loving people inside there. But to me, it always felt like that was for other people. You know what I mean? Like this big place. It's obviously, it's very, when you first see the Theatre Royal, it's very like grand. It's very, obviously it's Theatre Royal, so it's kind of like, oh, I'm not a royal kind of thing. Obviously, this is all subconscious, not more like, I don't really say this out loud. But yeah, and then obviously I know they're obviously fixing their ways and trying to work out how to get more diverse people into that. But I just think, yeah, I don't know what people's outreach is, but I know growing up, there wasn't any at all for me, for where I was, especially in the West End. But yeah, so that was that. So whilst in Excelsior, I got into poetry, spoken word poetry, and then I started performing it back in college. And then I didn't start writing poetry for myself until second year of university. And then I found that, yeah, and then I started trying to look around, see places that could put on poetry. And there wasn't, and there still isn't that many places today, unfortunately. So one second, I do have a PowerPoint, I'm just ad-libbing. So yeah, then obviously I found Bone Lippy, and then I found more recently there's Out of Your Head Theatre and Kind of Queer, these poetry events that I'm able to go and share my work on. I also did some poetry events, Our City, Our Dreams, Every, and then I was able to submit some of my work to the James Perrotty Poetry Prize, and I think being able to do that was really good for me, because I was able to say, hey, I do poetry and I actually enjoy it. Sorry, 1 second. But yeah, so obviously, when I was asked to do this, obviously one of the topics was accessibility, and obviously I can only talk about my experience, which is what I'm doing. So obviously I'm not sure on how it works on the other side. But I think for me, what was good was finding these little, well, not little, but finding certain people, finding certain organizations that were able to assist me now and again on my progression. I'm trying to work out on my poet, on my writer, am I an actor? So I ended up doing a response piece for Alphabetti back in February. I think that was my first professional gig. And then I was asked again to do another one a couple of weeks later. And I think stuff like that really, really helped me develop my work, really, really helped me work out what kind of writer I am and how am I, and give me the confidence to know that I am actually able to do this and then able to go forward to other places and present my work and show them, look, see, I can do this. Whatever gigs do you have for me? I did eventually do a feature show, More Blacks, More Dogs, My Irish, back in November, December last year. And then, yeah, I know that, again, it was at Alphabetti, that worked. Yeah, no, I really enjoyed that process. It was interesting to be able to show the whole world bits of my story. So basically the show was me and my Soul Slap partner, Wayne. We wrote a show, and then pretty much, although it wasn't our lives, we were able to put some of that onto the script. And I think that also helped us grow as people. We were able to work out certain things through it, which is always good to do. But yeah, no, I kind of went all over the place just then. But so one of the things that I wanted to say was when I was going through university, when I was going through the training, and obviously I was able to speak to certain people from the industry. I was able to learn certain things about how to network and how to get in. And one of the things I learned was to be interested, not interesting. And that really stuck with me for a long time now, even now. So obviously that's just when I go to places, I try to learn more about what they do and how they do it more specifically. And even now I'm trying to work out more in terms of right, how are you reaching out to people who look like me? For a while now, I don't know if this is a good thing or bad thing, but when I go to theatres, what I tend to do is I tend to look around, see who's there, or more specifically, see who's not there. And then also ask the question, why not? Why are certain people not here? Is it that they don't feel welcome to be here? Or is it that it just happened that they're busy this day? But to be fair, most places now, I start seeing more people coming, more diversity. There's still also a long way to go, very long way to go. But these kind of chats that we're doing is good. What needs to happen is stuff needs to be more implemented. And I think talking to people who don't feel welcome and asking them why would also really, really help. So I see that you're learning it from them specifically. As a writer, I learned that I was struggling with writer's block quite a lot. And what helped me with that, the reason I worked out the reason that I was having writer's block was that I was under the impression that what I had to say wouldn't work, wouldn't land with the places I wanted to be, the places that I wanted it to be put on. So I had to kind of like relearn that actually what I have to say is important and that people should hear it. Obviously, it's tend to be much more better articulated than this, but yeah, no. But yeah, that's pretty much it, really. Say thank you for listening, and I'll pass it back on to Leila. If you guys have any questions, obviously.
Papi, that was brilliant. Thank you so much, and you were very interesting, and that was absolutely, it was a really generous sharing of your experiences, so thank you so much. I'm going to move on to Chris, but if anybody's got any questions for Papi, if you could start dropping them in the chat, and then after Chris has spoken, do the same for Chris while Chris is speaking, and then I'll pull Papi and Chris back in together and we can sort of have a little bit of a chat before we move into the breakout spaces. So I'm going to pass on to Chris now. Thanks.
Morning, everybody. I'm just starting a timer there because I can talk for England. I'm a little bit nervous this morning, I'll be honest with you, because I've kind of sat on this stuff for maybe 30 years. I don't tend to talk about it a lot, about how I feel that maybe the arts aren't quite as accessible as we think that they are. First of all, a little bit about me. My name's Chris Connel. I'm an actor. I'm a presenter. But like Papi, I've got a lot of different hats I wear to make a living, and I make films and things as well. So what qualifies me to talk on this subject today? Well, I suppose, first of all, I'll have to tell you just how common I am. I was brought up in Walker, in the East End of Newcastle, in proper Walker, not the posh bits like Walkerville. I grew up in a place that used to be called The Dwellings, which was right next to the Stack pub on Walker Road, so what I like to call deepest, darkest Walker. And my earliest memories of feeling that I might be a little bit different than other people would be, whenever I went to visit somebody or went to somebody else's house, the first thing they would normally do would be to wash me. They would take me in, put me in the bath and scrub me up and make us look a little bit more presentable. So yeah, and so I would describe myself as a working class actor. That's what I would describe myself as. And when I use the term working class, I mean from a background that isn't very privileged, from an underprivileged background. Despite all of that, somehow I've managed to work as an actor and a writer and everything else in the arts for 30 years. You know, I spent years at the National Theatre. I've been on Broadway, lived in New York on the 43rd floor in the middle of Manhattan. I did a lot of telly when I was young, and somehow I've managed to pay my mortgage and my bills by working in the arts for the last 30 years. Now, but before I go any further, I have to give you a full disclaimer. I 100% live a middle-class life, right? So I'm not claiming to be a working class hero or to be representative of the working classes right at this moment in time, because, you know, I have somebody comes around and cleans on a Friday. I've got a dishwasher at Christmas. I got a subscription to Fair Trade Coffee Bean Club. So there's no getting away from it. I live a middle-class life. But I think I'm still very much in a position to have a valid opinion on the subject today, which in a nutshell to me would be, are the arts as accessible as the arts believe they are? And I can answer that fairly simply and say absolutely not. 100% certainty I can say that with, because of my own experiences. And I think the first time I ever realized that I was in some kind of strange vacuum when it came to the arts would have been, well, it would have been about 23, 24, and I'd been working for a few years. And any examples I give you, I've been very careful to make sure that either A, the artistic director isn't in position anymore, and B, I'm not going to name the company. But this experience was the first time that I ever thought, well, I might be in for a bit of a rough ride here. So there was a well-known, receiving and producing house in this region. Were putting on a well-known at that time, it wasn't contemporary, it was from the 60s, play written by a working class Geordie writer. And one of the parts in it was basically half of my life. So I thought, well, I'd be absolutely perfect for that. But I couldn't get an audition for it. And eventually, the individual who was directing the show agreed to see us. And I went in and I sat down in the office with this person. And the first thing they did was open a drawer, took out a pile of CVs, they put them down, and they said, this is what you're up against. And it's a very complicated and nuanced role. So I'm not looking to cast someone from the region. That's what that was the opening statement to me. So more or less what I took from that, it wasn't an insinuation. I think it was literally a statement of, you aren't clever enough to do this because you're too working class. That's the impression I got. You know, you live in the East End of Newcastle, you live in Newcastle, so I don't think you're bright enough to be in this play, which is ironically written by a working class Geordie writer, and the part is that of a working class Geordie. And it was at that point I kind of realised that there was going to be a little bit of an uphill battle. Now, don't get me wrong, I understand the position of privilege that I'm speaking from today. I get that I have been really fortunate to have a great career, you know, and to be able to pay the bills. I understand that I have a lot of privilege for being a white man. I understand that all of the problems that I've had going forward, if I was a person of colour, or if I was a newly arrived person of colour in this country, then of course that's a whole new that adds so much more. It's a much heavier weight to carry. But I also think it is worth talking about my experience as well, just on the broader working class front of it. I always very much get the impression that people expect certain things from working class actors, and that would be a limited range, a lack of professionalism, and a lack of intellect, and this sort of expectation that you should be humble and grateful for the opportunity, whatever that opportunity is. And I think that's hugely unfair, because it's hard enough to get into this business. And I would say that in this region, in the northeast of England, I've experienced just as much discrimination is maybe not the word I want to use, but I've come across those barriers just as much in this region as I have anywhere else in the country. You know, even in the early 90s, when it was quite fashionable to be a working class actor. I mean, that's how I kind of got my foot in the door, and I'll forever be grateful for that. But you know, another example would be of how underrepresented real working class people are. And I'm going to try and, I hope I'm making sense, but I'm trying to talk in the different levels of how common you are, right, for want of a better word. So in the 90s, there was a famous television series set in this region. It was a political series, and I went down to meet the writer who was from this region to be cast in the play, to be cast in the series. And I did what I thought was a really good audition, and the individual I was with said, "Oh, it was a really good audition," and then said, "But you're not actually from Newcastle, are you? I can tell by the accent." Now, that's not the first time that's happened to me. And I think the reason it's happened to me is because people are not used to hearing a genuine working class Geordie accent. So they've either heard a posh person doing the accent, or they've heard somebody from a slightly more middle class background doing a Geordie accent. And so I kind of felt then again that I'm in this kind of void of I'm too common for some people and not common enough for other people. And it's all a bit weird. And even when I was at the National Theatre, I got a review in the Stage which said that Chris Connell's Geordie accent wanders from the deep south to nowhere in some very uncomfortable moments. This is an accent I honed in Walker, an accent which was perfectly acceptable in the bacon sandwich shop at the end of my street, or the paper shop at the bottom of the road, or indeed to my neighbours. So all the way through my career, I have felt that I've kind of been fighting an uphill battle, and I'm not quite sure why it is. So there's an irony for you, is that I'm typecast more often in the northeast of England than I am anywhere else in the rest of the country. Now, don't get us wrong, that's not a complaint. I'm not. Well, it is a little bit of a complaint, but I don't want to whinge about it, because a lot of the most enjoyable work that I've ever done, the things that have brought me so much happiness and success and have taken us around the world, have been those, you know, real gritty, sort of repressed Geordie minor kind of roles, you know, the kind of stuff that I'm always going to be cast at. But for an example, you know, I've toured in national tours in all sorts of different roles. I'm just trying to think of an example, maybe Truscott in Lute, you know, that isn't a role that I would be considered for if that production came out of Newcastle, you know. So I suppose I'm putting that example in there just to show that even though we in the region might think that we are champions for the working class and champions for accessibility, that we've still got a lot of work to do. Do I feel excluded? Well, that's really difficult for me to say 100% yes, because as I say, I understand the position that I'm in. I'm very fortunate that I've done a lot of work and I've managed to make a living out of it, and I've done some pretty prestigious stuff, and I am really grateful for that. But I think I am excluded at times, and I think an example of that might have been when I met Ken Loach, right? So when Ken Loach was coming to Newcastle to make I, Daniel Blake, I thought, this is it, right? So I haven't had a space, I haven't had anywhere where I felt 100% comfortable ever. This surely is it. And I went to meet him. And it became apparent quite quickly that he was more interested in a voyeuristic thing rather than hiring me as a professional Geordie, you know, as an actor. From a working class background who managed to plough. In fact, that all seemed to be going against me, and he wasn't at all impressed that I had managed to sort of plough a furrow in this business anyway. And I remember sitting in the waiting room to go in, and I was sat next to a guy who was the union rep for the workers at the ministry. And I said, that's interesting why you're here. I said, because I did a lot of work with my own union equity. I said to him, you know, I'm sure you'll understand, you know, as one union person speaking to another, that you shouldn't really be here today, because it should be actors who are in here to be seen for these parts. And he was, yes, I absolutely agree with you, but they've asked us to come in to see if I want to be in it. And don't get me wrong, it was a great film. And like Davy Johns, who took the lead in it, is a proper working class lad. I've known him for a long time. So, you know, but I suppose what I'm trying to prove with that is that even where I thought I would find absolute solace, that I was still felt lonely, and I still felt like I didn't fit in. I still felt like I was just some kind of anomaly, like a real genuine working class person who had managed to forge a career in this industry, and that was being held against us. And it kind of sometimes feel like you can't win. Something really interesting, the place I feel most comfortable working is neither in the arts or not in the arts. So I do a lot of corporate work, training people, and it's generally in the oil industry and the gas industry. We use drama to train people, and a lot of actors do that because they haven't got anything else going on, or just simply as a way of putting money in the bank. But I do it because I absolutely love it, because it's the only place I ever feel that I fit in, because I don't feel like I fit in back where I come from. I don't feel like I fit in the arts, but I do feel that I do feel in that environment, my working class credentials are seen as a real bonus because I'm relatable, but my intellect is never questioned. Nobody ever makes assumptions about me because of the way I talk. And so that's really weird. For me, I love the arts. I love what I do, and I love working in this sector. I absolutely adore it. But the only place I genuinely feel comfortable is in that sort of in the middle world, where I kind of feel that I'm not judged for who I am. And I'm aware I've gone on a little bit of a rant there. But I think, to sum up, in short, the arts has given me so much. And there are so many great companies out there doing all sorts of work, Blown Hooli, Open Clasp, Curious Monkey, loads of companies doing absolutely fantastic work. So this isn't, as Leila said, anybody's attempt to bash things. Oh, one more thing, sorry, before I go on. Leila touched very briefly on the sort of neurotypical thing. I was diagnosed 10 11 years ago with adult ADHD, and it wasn't a diagnosis I was looking for. It was suggested in relation to something else I was seeing a psychiatrist for at the time. And I got that diagnosis, and it totally made sense of my life. Now, if I want to apply for funding to do any work, I'm excluded. There's no arguments about that. If I didn't have the wonderful wife that I've got, who is a magnificent and talented author in her own right, and a great person, if I didn't have her, I'd say a third of my work would be completely inaccessible for me, because the thought that I just can't go through that process, which relies on you being very academically sound, and I'm not. You know, I don't have any formal qualifications. I've got an A in drama GCSE and a C in electronics, and that's it. So for me, that's a big issue as well, which obviously has hindered me a little bit on the way. Also, so I'm going to sum up. I'm going to say, yeah, I'm really grateful for the career I've got. I understand the privilege that I have as well. I've really enjoyed me 30 years. I probably wouldn't change a thing, but there's a lot of work still to do. There's a lot of work still to do when it comes to class and making working class people's professionals, not just engaging with them and not just showing them how wonderful the arts can be as a way of developing as a human being, but actually making them into professionals and accepting them on an equal level. I'll leave it there.